Immediately, I lost my job after my accident. My daughter walked out of my life. She said, "You can't take care of me anymore. I am going to be with my stepdad." I asked her to stay to take care of me, but she laughed and said, "Just get someone else to take care of you. I am not your servant." What happened next will shock you. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to James Kamen from Atlanta. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. My name is Raymond Tiller, and I wasn't anyone special before the accident. Just a 53-year-old warehouse supervisor who paid his taxes, showed up early, stayed late, and used every extra dollar he had to give his daughter the life I never had. Her name is Mariah, and from the moment she took her first breath, I made a quiet vow that I would never let her feel what abandonment felt like. Her mother, Cheryl, left when Mariah was 10 and remarried a man with a boat and a pension by the time she was 12. Mariah stayed with me. I packed her school lunches, flat-ironed her hair before middle school dances, and sat through every parent-teacher conference in a folding chair with a pen in hand like it was a business meeting. I didn't date. I didn't vacation. Every dime and every decision was made with her in mind. That's why it cut so deep when she looked me in the eye and said the one thing I never imagined she'd say. The accident wasn't dramatic. There was no explosion, no blood on the pavement. Just a routine delivery on a rainy Wednesday that turned into 3 slipped discs, a fractured hip, and a ruptured tendon in my knee. I remember falling harder than I expected. There was a crack I could feel before I heard it, and then a dull hum like someone had pressed pause on the world. I lay there in the shipping bay, looking up at the flickering industrial lights, and the only thought I had, honest to God, was, how am I going to get Mariah's car payment covered this month? That's the sort of man I was, always calculating her needs into my own crisis. The hospital was cold and smelled like overcooked vegetables and antiseptic. I had just gotten out of surgery, groggy from anesthesia, when she came in. Her hair was long and straight like she used to wear it in high school, and for a brief second I thought, maybe, just maybe, she was here to hold my hand and reassure me like I always had for her. Instead, she stood by the door with her arms crossed, shifting her weight like she had somewhere else to be. "You okay?" she asked, but her tone didn't match the question. I nodded slowly and said, "I'm glad you came." "I can't stay long," she replied. "I just came to let you know I'm moving out. I'm going to live with Mom and Tim." It didn't register at first. I blinked at her, still foggy from the morphine. "What are you talking about?" "You can't take care of me anymore, Dad," she said, like it was obvious. "You can't even walk. I can't live like this, nursing you back to health like some kind of servant. It's not fair to me." There was a lump in my throat I couldn't swallow. "I didn't ask you to be my nurse, baby. I just thought, maybe you'd want to be here. With me." She laughed. Not cruel, exactly, but dismissive, like I was a naive old man who didn't get it. "You need to get someone else to take care of you. I'm not equipped for this. I have a life." I wanted to tell her that her whole life had been built on my back. That her sorority dues, her first car, her rent while she figured things out after college, every cent of it came from the man lying broken in that hospital bed. But I didn't say any of it, because some part of me still believed she would come around, that she'd feel the weight of it later and regret how she handled this. I was wrong. Over the next few days, the silence from her was louder than the machines in my hospital room. Cheryl never called. Tim never visited. I was alone, trying to figure out how to get through recovery with no one in my corner. Then, out of nowhere, a call came from the legal department at the company. The words were careful, legal-sounding. Liability. Long-term impact. Settlement. $800,000. I listened quietly, nodding to myself. That money should have felt like a blessing. But all I could think about was how no one would believe I wasn't chasing a payday. Mariah certainly wouldn't. She had already decided I was a burden. So I made a decision. I didn't tell a soul. Not her. Not Cheryl. Not even my neighbor, who dropped off food from time to time. I hired a full-time home care nurse named Samuel. Mid-40s, former Army medic, soft-spoken but efficient. He didn't ask questions. He just helped me get out of bed, took care of my meds, and reminded me that recovery was a process. I never told him about the money either. I wanted to heal in peace, free from obligation, free from performance. The first few weeks were the hardest. Every ache reminded me that I was alone. But gradually, I started to realize the quiet wasn't so bad. I read books I'd been putting off, learned how to cook a few decent meals. I even started journaling. Not because I had some poetic urge, but because I needed to make sense of how my daughter had just walked out of my life like I was some expired credit card. I was still journaling one afternoon when I heard a knock on the door. Not the kind of knock you give when you're delivering food. A hesitant knock. A guilty one. It was her. She had makeup on and wore a sweater I bought her last Christmas. "Hey," she said, tilting her head like we were old friends catching up. I didn't move from the recliner. "Hey, I heard about the settlement," she said, not wasting any time. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I waited for the rest. The justification. The performance. I was going through a lot, she continued. It wasn't fair of me to leave. I just didn't know how to handle everything. But I'm here now. I almost laughed. I'm not angry, I said, and it was the truth. But I've made peace with how things are. She stepped closer. Can we talk about things? Maybe I could move back in. Help out. I have help, I said. And you made your choice. She blinked, stunned. So that's it. That's it, I replied. I needed you when I was at my lowest, and you left. Now that I'm better, and have something you want, you come back. I may have been broken, but I wasn't stupid. Her expression darkened. You're being unfair. No, I said. For the first time, I'm being fair to myself. She left without another word. And I sat back, breathing in the silence like it was fresh air. The first morning back home from the hospital was the quietest my house had ever been. I sat in my living room wrapped in a blanket I didn't remember owning, the nurse moving around the kitchen like he'd always lived there. His name was Samuel Grant, and he came highly recommended, 46, ex-military, widowed, and dead serious about boundaries. I'm not your friend, he said the first day. But I'll take care of you like you're my brother. That's the promise. I respected that. In fact, I needed that. I didn't have the emotional capacity for anyone who needed me to perform grief or smile through pain. I had nothing to give, and it was strange realizing that after decades of giving, nobody had anything left for me either. Each morning, Samuel helped me from the recliner to the walker, then to the bathroom. He never rushed me. He never looked at me with pity, which made it easier to hold on to what little pride I had left. But pride has sharp edges. It doesn't cradle you when the house feels too big, too hollow. It doesn't warm your chest when the daughter you raised like glass hasn't called in 3 weeks. I told myself I didn't care, that the silence was a blessing. But there were moments, late at night, when the painkillers wore off and the hum of the refrigerator was the only noise in the house. When I'd look at my phone, half expecting it to ring. It never did. The first week I got home, I tried to go through the house and make sense of what was left. I found an old envelope in my nightstand drawer, one of those padded yellow ones, with a breakdown of Mariah's college expenses. I had printed it out years ago, using a red pen to cross off each payment. Tuition, books, off-campus housing, car repairs. I even paid for her study abroad trip to Barcelona junior year, even though I never understood why she needed to fly across the world to learn independence. Looking at those numbers again was like pressing a bruise. I could almost hear her voice asking for just a little help, Dad, and see myself reaching for my wallet before she finished the sentence. Every decision I made for 23 years had her at the center. Now, she wasn't even a voicemail. Samuel saw me reading the papers. He didn't say anything right away, but later, while he was reheating soup, he leaned against the counter and said, "You planning to keep hurting yourself on purpose, or are you going to start living again?" I gave him a look. "Excuse me. I've seen this before," he said. Men holding on to receipts like they explain everything. They don't. Either she's the person you hoped she'd be, or she isn't. Either way, what you did for her doesn't go away. But what you do next, that's on you. I didn't respond, but I heard him. And maybe I needed someone to say it that plain. Because for the next few days, I stopped digging through old drawers. I stopped trying to make sense of the timeline between her pulling away and me falling apart. I focused on healing, on walking from the bedroom to the kitchen without gripping the walls, on feeding myself, on sleeping more than 3 hours a night. Samuel gave me a routine. He didn't ask about Mariah, and I didn't offer. Then came the check. It arrived in a thick envelope, stamped and certified, with a letter from the legal department and a settlement document signed by the company's HR rep and a notary. $800,000. I held the check in my hand like it was radioactive. Not because of what it was, but because of what it meant. I could rebuild my life. I could pay off the house. I could retire early. I could even leave this place and start somewhere new, far from the memories stitched into the carpet and walls. But I also knew what this money would do to people, and I wasn't ready to test that theory just yet. So I made a second decision. I told no one. Not Samuel, not Cheryl, and definitely not Mariah. Instead, I opened a private account, moved the funds, and started drafting a will, something I hadn't done since Mariah was in high school. I didn't make any big purchases. No new cars. No flashy renovations. I just lived. Quietly. With intention. For once. A few weeks later, Diane, my next-door neighbor, knocked on my door. Mid-60s, sharp tongue, but kind. She brought a Tupperware full of lasagna and a lemon pie. "You look like hell," she said with a grin. "Which means you're on the mend." I smiled. "Thanks, Diane. That's very backhandedly sweet of you." She sat down on the couch without asking. "So, where's the girl? I figured she'd be fussing over you by now." I hesitated. "She moved in with her mother. Said she couldn't take care of me." Diane raised an eyebrow. "She said that?" I nodded. "Called me a burden. Said she's not my servant." Diane whistled low. "Kids these days. Entitled and slippery. But you didn't raise her that way, did you?" "No," I said quietly. "I didn't." She watched me for a long moment, like she was trying to decide whether to speak. "You know, sometimes people show you who they are when it costs them something to stay. Maybe that's what this is." "I don't want to hate her," I admitted. I can't unhear what she said. "You don't have to hate her," she said, standing up. "But you don't have to keep setting yourself on fire to keep her warm, either." After she left, I sat with that thought for hours. It rang in my ears long after the dishes were clean and the pain in my hip had settled. I knew Diane was right. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to punish Mariah. I just wanted clarity and peace. The funny thing about peace, though, it doesn't come with closure. It comes with silence. And you have to learn how to sit with it. And I did. Until one day, the silence broke. Samuel answered the door and called out, "You have a visitor." I wheeled myself into the living room and froze. It was Mariah, hair tied back, designer purse in hand, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hey, Dad," she said. "Can we talk?" I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at her, studying her like I was trying to identify a familiar face in a crowd. Same cheekbones. Same tilt of her smile. But something in her eyes was different, glassy, uncertain, like a child unsure if she was in trouble or not. She looked around the room, her gaze landing on the walker, the recliner, the small pile of prescription bottles on the end table. Then her eyes came back to mine, trying to gauge my reaction. I saw the calculation happening behind her lashes, the silent equation. What can I say that he wants to hear? Samuel lingered in the hallway, but I gave him a slight nod, and he disappeared back into the kitchen. I motioned toward the chair across from me. She hesitated before sitting, smoothing the front of her jeans like she was interviewing for a job. "I heard about the settlement," she said, trying to keep her tone light. "I didn't know, Dad. I'm really sorry about how I left things. It was always the same. Start with apology, slide in the justification, end with a request." I'd seen this pattern before, just never aimed at me. "You didn't know?" I repeated slowly. "And if you had..." She paused. "I still would have come. I mean, yeah, maybe I handled things wrong, but I was overwhelmed. Everything happened so fast. I didn't know what to do. I'm not a nurse." I panicked. I stared at her for a long time, letting the silence thicken. "You didn't panic, Mariah. You calculated. You looked at me and decided I wasn't worth the effort. You didn't even call to check in." "That's not fair," she snapped, her composure cracking. "I was going through my own stuff. Mom and Tim were pressuring me, and..." "Stop," I said, voice low. Just stop. You made your choice. You left when I needed you most. You told me I wasn't your responsibility. Her face crumpled. I didn't mean it like that. But you said it, I replied. And you didn't just say it. You meant it. I saw it in your face. She dropped her gaze, blinking rapidly. I've changed, Dad. I've been thinking about everything. I miss you. I want to come back. And there it was. The ask. I leaned back slowly. Come back? You think this is some kind of loyalty test you can retake? She shook her head. No. I want to make things right. I was stupid. I was scared. You were selfish, I corrected. And now that you think there's something in it for you, you've decided to grow a conscience. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then she stood up suddenly, hands trembling. I can't believe you're talking to me like this. After everything we've been through. I stared at her with a tired kind of sadness. You mean after everything I did for you? All those years I kept you fed, warm, safe. I didn't walk away when your mother did. I didn't quit when I was exhausted. I didn't leave you in the hospital when you had that kidney infection at 15. I stayed. She turned away, arms crossed. People make mistakes. You're not perfect either. No, I'm not, I said. But I never abandoned you. The silence between us stretched again. And for a brief second, I saw it. The little girl I once carried through a thunderstorm, wrapped in my coat, clinging to my neck like I was the whole world. Now here she was, grown and distant, a stranger in my living room, begging in circles for something she didn't fully understand. It wasn't the money. Not really. It was access. Comfort. The safety net I'd always been. She didn't miss me. She missed the version of me that made life easy. Maybe this was a mistake, she said finally, her voice sharper. I came here to apologize, and you're acting like I'm some gold digger. I nodded slowly. You came here to see if there was still something left to take. But I've got nothing for you, Mariah. Not anymore. She glared at me for a beat, then grabbed her purse. Fine. Enjoy your money, old man. But don't expect me to care when you end up dying alone. The door slammed behind her, rattling the frame. And I sat there, staring at the empty space she left behind, more exhausted than angry. That night, Diane came over again. She didn't knock, just opened the door and stuck her head in. I saw her car earlier, she said, walking in with 2 glasses and a bottle of red wine. Didn't look like a friendly visit. It wasn't, I said, too tired to elaborate. She poured us each a glass. You know, she said, taking a sip. I always hoped she'd turn out better than her mother. I sighed. Me too. She doesn't know what she just lost, Diane added. I don't think she ever knew what she had, I replied. We sat in silence for a while. The wine burned a little going down, but it quieted the storm in my chest. She'll be back, Diane said eventually. I know. And next time, she'll find the locks changed. Diane nodded. Good. It started small, like most storms do. First, a cousin I hadn't heard from in 3 years messaged me on Facebook. Hey, Uncle Ray. Heard you came into some money. Hope you're doing okay. We should catch up sometime. I stared at the message for a while, unsure whether to laugh or curse. A few hours later, a voicemail popped up from Cheryl, my ex-wife. Ray, listen, I know things have been weird, but Mariah is going through a tough time. Maybe you could just be a little more open to her. She's young. She made a mistake. Don't throw away your relationship over one misstep. I deleted it before she finished. The only thing more insulting than Cheryl defending our daughter's betrayal was the assumption that I was the one being unreasonable. That week, the trickle turned into a flood. Second cousins. High school friends. A guy I barely knew from the warehouse who once borrowed my jumper cables. All reaching out. All suddenly concerned about how I was doing. One even had the gall to send me a GoFundMe link, in case you're feeling generous. I knew then, Mariah had told someone. Maybe not directly, maybe not intentionally, but word had gotten out, and fast. The air changed. Where there was once silence, now there was noise. And every message, every call, every nudge was soaked in the same sour desperation. What can we get from Ray while the money's fresh? It didn't take long before the real grenade dropped. One morning, Samuel walked in from the porch holding his phone. You seen this? He asked, holding the screen out toward me. I squinted. It was a screenshot of a Facebook post. Some people only love you when they can use you. My own father turned his back on me the second I stopped serving his needs. Now he's sitting on a fortune while pretending to be a victim. If he dies alone, it's because he chose money over family. Hashtag truth hurts. It was from Mariah's account. Public. Comments open. Likes climbing fast. I leaned back, heart thudding in a dull, slow ache. Samuel lowered the phone, his expression unreadable. You want me to respond? He asked quietly. No, I said. Let her talk. She already left once. I don't need her permission to be alone. But I felt it. That old ache. The kind that curls up behind your ribs when your blood turns hot with shame. Not because you've done something wrong, but because someone you love is twisting your truth into a weapon. My phone rang less than an hour later. Diane. I just saw it, she said without even saying hello. Want me to post something? No, I replied. Let it burn. She exhaled hard. You're handling this better than I would. I'm not handling it, I admitted. I'm enduring it. That afternoon, I stayed offline. No calls. No texts. Just silence. But silence can feel like suffocation when your name is being dragged through digital mud. I kept wondering who was reading that post. Old friends? Coworkers? Neighbors? Were they believing it? Were they nodding along? Thinking, yeah, Ray always was a little self-centered. I hated that thought. Not because I needed their approval, but because I had spent my entire life trying to be the opposite of that man. I didn't sleep that night. My hip throbbed with a vengeance, but it wasn't just the injury. It was the tension, the betrayal rearing up again, now amplified and shared with the world like a public performance. At 2 a.m., I finally caved. I wrote a comment beneath her post. Not defensive, not bitter, just honest. I loved you with every dollar and decision I ever had. When I needed love in return, you left. Now that I'm standing again, you want to rewrite the story. I won't argue, but I won't fund the next chapter either. Then I logged off. The next morning, she deleted the post. But the damage was done. 2 days later, Mariah showed up again. No call, no warning. Just a knock on the door and the sound of her voice calling. Dad, please. Just talk to me. Samuel looked at me. I gave a nod. She stood on the porch in sweatpants. No makeup, dark circles under her eyes. I messed up, she said before I could speak. I posted that because I was angry and embarrassed. I didn't know how to face you. You could have started by not lying to the world, I said, voice even. I wasn't lying, she replied quickly. I mean, I was, kind of, but I was also hurt. You shut me out. You shut me out first, I reminded her. You walked away when I couldn't walk at all. She flinched. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. Mom and Tim, they told me I didn't owe you anything, that I should focus on myself. And that's what you did. I was scared, Dad. And now, she looked down, biting her lip. Now I realize I was wrong, that I didn't just leave you. I betrayed you. I didn't respond. I watched her squirm in the silence. I'm not here for money, she added, voice soft. You're not getting any, I said. Tears welled in her eyes. I figured, but I had to try. I nodded. At least now you're honest. She sniffed and looked away, toward the street. So this is it. This is me choosing peace, I said, and finally letting go. She didn't argue. She didn't scream. She just nodded slowly, turned, and walked back to her car. And for the first time in weeks, I breathed without pain. I didn't expect the silence after the storm to be louder than the storm itself. But it was. After Mariah deleted the post and left my porch without fanfare, there was no apology tour, no cleanup attempt, no one reaching out to right the wrongs. Just this long, yawning quiet that sat heavy in my chest. I waited, half out of habit and half out of old hope. Waited for someone to knock, to call, to say, hey, that wasn't fair to you. I see you. But the thing about betrayal is that once it happens in the daylight, people treat you like the crack in the foundation was always there. Nobody looks twice at a fractured family. They just step around the debris and move on. The neighborhood grew colder, not in weather, but in temperature. Diane still came by with food and wit, but even she seemed a little more cautious now, like I was glass she didn't want to tap too hard. One day, I caught her standing in my kitchen, holding a mug of coffee she hadn't taken a sip from. She was staring at me like she didn't recognize the man sitting in the chair. What? I asked. She hesitated. You've changed. How? Not worse, she said carefully. Just different. Quieter. Less trusting. Like you're waiting for someone else to let you down. I looked away, jaw tight. Can you blame me? No, she said. But I also don't want to see you shrink into yourself. That girl hurt you bad. But don't let her make you smaller than you were. She didn't, I replied, though it wasn't entirely true. I had shrunk, folded inward like a house after a fire. Everything still stood, but the air inside was thick with smoke, memory, and the smell of something burnt beyond repair. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even the public shaming or the begging at my doorstep. It was what came after. The way everyone else treated me like I was the one who changed the script. I heard through a friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in months, that Mariah had been telling people I was getting senile, that I was lashing out because I was in pain, isolating because I couldn't handle being vulnerable. She was rewriting the story in small, subtle ways. Not outright lies. Just poisoned versions of the truth, bent just enough to make her look like the concerned daughter and me like a bitter, broken man refusing help. It was a clever move, and it worked. Old coworkers stopped calling. Extended family unfriended me. The small town I lived in began whispering behind my back like I was the one who flipped. I became the villain in her carefully curated narrative. A father who had money and no love left to give. A man who turned his daughter away when all she wanted was to come home. But I knew the truth. And truth doesn't need permission to exist. One night, while flipping through channels, I landed on an old home video. It was Christmas, Mariah was 9, and we were living in the apartment above the hardware store. She was sitting in my lap, unwrapping a dollhouse I'd worked overtime for 3 months to afford. The way her face lit up when she tore off the paper, it was pure joy. I watched that clip 3 times, barely blinking. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. Not for the money, not for the betrayal, but for the time. The years I would never get back. The moments I thought meant something. The belief that my love had built something permanent when it had only bought temporary gratitude. 2 days later, Cheryl called again. This time, I answered. Ray, she said, voice soft, rehearsed. I don't want to argue. I just want to talk. Then talk, I said. She's not doing well, Cheryl continued. She's ashamed. She made a mess of everything, and now she's too proud to fix it. She's not too proud, I said. She's too entitled. There was a pause. Then a sigh. She's 23. She doesn't know who she is yet. She knew enough to walk away. She knew enough to post lies online. She was scared, Cheryl insisted. You were always so strong, Ray. Maybe she didn't know how to handle seeing you weak. I let out a bitter laugh. I was never weak. I was hurt. There's a difference. I know, Cheryl said softly. But maybe if you could just talk to her. Just once more. I shook my head. You're only asking now because she's lost the audience. She's still your daughter. She was my responsibility. I corrected. That season has passed. She loves you. No, Cheryl, I said, voice firm. She loves what I gave her. Not me. There was silence on the other end. Then, quietly, I'm sorry. I didn't respond. I ended the call. Later that night, Samuel sat down with me during dinner. He'd been quieter since the whole ordeal began, but I could tell he had something to say. You know, he began, pushing peas around his plate. I've seen soldiers abandoned by their own families, left to rot in rehab centers while their wives moved on. Kids stopped calling. It's always the same story. They give everything, and then when there's nothing left to give, nobody shows up. I nodded. But you, he continued, you made it. Not just physically. You kept your dignity. That's rare. Doesn't feel like it. It is, he said. And one day, when you're further down the road, you'll realize how clean your hands are. That matters more than revenge. Maybe, I said. No maybe, he replied. You stood tall when everyone expected you to fall. I didn't have a response, but I slept better that night than I had in weeks. There was a stillness that settled into the house by late spring. Not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that feels earned, like the quiet that follows after a storm has spent itself. I moved more steadily now. The limp hadn't fully gone away, and probably never would, but I no longer needed Samuel to hover near me with every step. He'd started pulling back on purpose, still present, still steady, but but giving me back pieces of myself that had once felt lost. My mornings became routines of strength, not survival. I brewed my own coffee, opened the windows, watered the plants I never used to have time for. For the first time in decades, I lived like no one was depending on me. And the strange part was, it didn't feel selfish. It felt sacred. I had come to realize that love, the kind I gave, the kind that bled out over years like a slow leak, had to be redirected now. Not toward Mariah, not toward reconciliation, but toward the man I had been ignoring for years. The man who worked double shifts without complaint, skipped vacations, sold his motorcycle to cover tuition. That man deserved peace. He deserved gentleness. And maybe even a little joy. I spent so long being her father, I forgot what it meant to be Raymond. Just Raymond. It was a Tuesday when the letter came. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. I'd seen it on birthday cards, apology notes, permission slips. Inside was a single page. I know I can't undo what I did. And I know you'll never see me the same again. But I need you to know I still think about you every day. I'm sorry I broke something I didn't know how to fix. I hope you're happy. I hope you're healing. I hope, one day, you'll remember the good things too. Love, Mariah. I read it twice. Then again, my eyes didn't water. My hands didn't shake. But my chest tightened in that familiar way, like standing in a doorway you'll never step through again. It was not a letter of change. Not a letter of ownership. It was a soft reach, a last thread tossed across a canyon too wide now to bridge. And I knew then, I didn't need to respond. Instead, I pulled out my will. Over the past few weeks, I'd been finalizing it. Quietly. Intentionally. My house was paid off. I had no debts. The $800,000, carefully managed, was still mostly untouched. And I knew exactly what I wanted it to do. I set up a trust fund. Not for Mariah, but for an organization that helped injured workers recover and reintegrate. People like me. People who'd been dropped the minute they stopped being useful. I left a portion to the local community center that housed single fathers, and a modest amount to Samuel, for his steady hands and quiet compassion. I added a clause that nothing would go to anyone who hadn't spoken to me in the last 2 years without expectation of money. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. I left nothing to Mariah. She hadn't just walked away from my care. She'd walked away from my humanity. And I couldn't reward someone who only returned when it was convenient. Forgiveness didn't mean restoration. And closure didn't mean reunion. A month later, I sat on the back porch with Diane. She just existed next to me, like a tree with roots deep enough to weather whatever season came. You seem lighter, she said, watching the sky turn that pale shade of lavender only early evenings seemed to hold. I am, I replied, for the first time in years. She sipped her wine, still thinking about her. Sometimes, I admitted, but not with anger. Just awareness. That's good, she said. Awareness won't kill you. Bitterness will. I nodded. She wrote me a letter. Diane raised an eyebrow. And I read it. Then I let it go. She smiled. You finally chose yourself. I finally remembered I was allowed to. I didn't know what the future held. Maybe one day she'd try again. Maybe she wouldn't. But the difference now was that I wasn't waiting. I wasn't aching for her name to pop up on my phone or for an apology to ring loud enough to drown out the past. I had stopped bleeding for people who wouldn't so much as offer a band-aid. That didn't make me cruel. That made me human. I stood by my decision, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. I had spent enough of my life proving my love. It was time, finally, to protect it. Have you ever had to choose your peace over your blood? Ever realized that love doesn't always mean reunion? And sometimes, it means standing alone with your dignity intact? If this story spoke to you, share your experience in the comments. Let's talk about forgiveness, boundaries, and the kind of love that doesn't fold when tested. Subscribe for more stories like this, real, raw, and honest. See you soon in the next story.